When they busted out of the winter with a 9-0 start to the new season, the Detroit Tigers got people thinking about the 1984 World Series early in the spring. And by the time they streaked all the way to 35-5, we all pretty much assumed the Tigers would end the year as champions. It would have been a disappointment if they didn't, really. But before the Tigers could ascend to the throne, we had an exciting summer ahead of us, one that included breakout seasons by the San Diego Padres and Chicago Cubs, not to mention another National League West title for the Kansas City Royals. In the end, the Pads beat out the Sweetheart Cubs and MVP Ryan Sandberg for National League supremacy, and Detroit rolled over KC in the ALCS. Would the Tigers hold true to their season-long dominance and prevail over San Diego in the Fall Classic? You probably know the answer to that by now, but it's never too late to drink in the 1984 World Series again. So let's imbibe game by game and give a nod to one baseball card which best exemplifies how each contest played out. This game started exactly the way the Tigers wanted it to. A Lou Whitaker double, followed by an Alan Trammell single, had Detroit up 1-0 after two batters. Trammell got caught stealing, and Kirk Gibson flied out, but the next two Tigers, Lance Parrish and Larry Herndon, singled. Barbaro Garvey grounded out to end the inning, but the Tigers had shown that they could rough up starter Mark Thurmond, and with ace Jack Morris on the mound, they probably only needed a single run anyway. Those assumptions fell apart quickly, though, as Morris surrendered two out singles to Steve Garvey and Craig Nettles, and then a double to catcher Terry Kennedy that drove both home. Bobby Brown ended the inning with a groundout, but the Farriers were up at home in Game 1. For the last three innings, the two starters settled into bend but don't break mode, allowing some base runners but no runs. It looked like more of the same in the top of the fifth, when left fielder Larry Herndon stepped to the plate against Thurmond, with two outs, and Parrish on second after he had doubled. This time, though, Herndon drove Thurmond's 3-1 pitch the other way and deposited it behind the right field wall. As it turns out, that was the end of the scoring. San Diego manager Dick Williams lifted Thurmond for Andy Hawkins in the sixth, and he and Morris quieted the lumber for the rest of the game. Herndon juiced just enough thunder from his bat to get the job done, though, and his 1984 Topps card approximately shows him and his weapon about to step into the batter's box to get down to business. Game 2 started out eerily similar to Game 1, with slugger Darrell Evans joining Trammell, Gibson, and Parrish in a first-inning Tigers attack on Padres starter Ed Whitson, before Hawkins came in for the last out. After a string of hits and steals and sacrifices, Detroit emerged with a 3-0 lead. San Diego scratched out a run in the bottom of the frame, courtesy of an Alan Wiggins single, a Tony Gwynn walk, a Garvey sac bunt, and a Nettles sac fly. That was all anyone could muster until the Pads gritted out another run against Dan Petrie in the fourth inning, as Hawkins turned in a string of 1-2-3 innings. After the Tigers went down in order in the fifth, Garvey flied out to center, Nettles walked, and Kennedy singled to bring up Kurt Bevacqua. The former bubblegum bubble-blowing champ wouldn't have been in the lineup at all had the designated hitter rule not been in effect. But he used that quirk to good advantage and rocked the 0-1 pitch from Petrie for a 3-run blast. Note, from 1976 through 1984, the designated hitter was used in the Fall Classic in even-numbered years. In came Aurelio Lopez to retire the Padres, but the damage was done, and that was the last bit of scoring for the night, and San Diego had its first win in a World Series game, and their only one to date. Bevacqua's 1984 Topps card ironically shows him in the field, a position he never assumed on his big night. The first two games of the 1984 World Series came down to big innings, big moments, and then long stretches of stingy pitching. Game 3 was no different, except the big inning and the big moment came early on and set the tone for the rest of the game, and really the rest of the series. With the Fall Classic knotted at a game apiece and moving back to Detroit, You had to figure the Tigers had the advantage, but this was no rollover for the Padres team. Things stayed as tied up as they could be through three scoreless half innings before Chet Lemon singled with one out in the bottom of the second. Padres starter Tim Lolar then uncorked a wild pitch, sending Lemon to second, and Evans lofted a sac fly to center that got his teammate on third. All the next batter, Marty Castillo, needed in order to get the Bengals on board was a deep fly ball, and he obliged, with a home run to left field. That 2-0 lead greased the skids for a hit-and-walk barrage by Lou Whitaker, Trammell, Gibson, Parrish, and Herndon, staking Tiger starter Matt Wilcock to a 4-0 lead. On a side note, designated hitter Barbaro Garby made the first and last outs of the second for the Tigers. The Pad squeaked out a couple of runs over the next 7 innings, but it was a 2-0 romp for Detroit, and they never really looked back. A smiling Castillo on his 1984 Donruss card looks like he just might have the inkling of what lay ahead, do you think? As Game 4 dawned, you could sense the Tigers were starting to lock in, and if you needed more proof of that, Jack Morris gave it to you in the top of the first by inducing groundouts from Wiggins, Gwynn, and Garvey. That brought up the top of the Tiger order, and they repeated their exploits from the beginning of Game 1, only better. After Lou Whitaker reached base on an error by Wiggins, Trammell went deep on a 2-0 offering from Eric Show. Kennedy touched Jack Morris for a homer in the bottom half of the inning, but Whitaker and Trammell struck again in the third, a sweet Lou single followed by a Trammell dinger. Morris shut down the Padres the rest of the way until allowing a run in the ninth on a wild pitch. It was too much, too little, too late for the San Diego crew. Even though his season-high home run total entering the season was just 14, Trammell's appearance in the Drake's Big Hitter set seemed just about perfect given his World Series MVP performance. There was blood in the water for the Tigers as they entered Game 5 of the World Series at home, up 3-1. They feasted heartily. After a leadoff single by Alan Wiggins, starter Dan Petry retired the Padres in order in the first. In the bottom of the first, the Tigers sang a familiar song, even if all the parts were jostled a bit. Whitaker led off. Trammell grounded out to advance the should-be Hall of Fame second baseman, and then Kirk Gibson stepped to the plate. Channeling his 1988 flair for the dramatic, Gibby drove Mike Thurman's first pitch into the right center bleachers, and the Tigers were up 2-0. They would tack on another run before the inning was over. The Pats fought back with a run in the third and 2 in the fourth, but the Tigers reclaimed the lead with single scores in the fifth and the seventh. After Bevacqua connected on a solo shot off of Willie Hernandez in the top of the eighth, the Tigers clung to a 1-run lead. Castillo led off at the bottom of the frame with a walk, and Whitaker reached base on a sacrifice bunt attempt. Trammell bunted too, sacrificing himself to move his teammates along. That brought up Gibson again, and he did what Kirk Gibson does in the postseason. Namely, he pounded Rich Gossage's 1-0 offering over the right field fence, and the Tigers suddenly were up 8-4. In the top of the ninth, Bruce Bochy managed a one-out single against Hernandez, but this thing was over. Gibson's 1984 Nestle card shows the two-time World Series hero getting ready to practice his craft in the cage at Tiger Stadium. Think he was imagining the glory to come, playing through World Series scenarios like a kid in the backyard? Yeah, me too. Like this video? Then like this video and subscribe to our channel, waxpackgods.com.